Welcome to Summit University. Today our guest is Steven Acuff. He's a best-selling author and lecturer on health and diet in Europe and the United States. Mr. Acuff specializes in the macrobiotic diet. He is an instructor at the Cushy Institutes in Massachusetts and a nutritional counselor at a medical clinic in Germany. He is also director of a macrobiotic center in Sweden. Mr. Acuff is here today to talk about Oriental Diagnosis.
This session, we're going to begin with the evaluation of the condition. Until now, we've been dealing with constitution. Previous session went into the basic body structure, which is determined by your genetic background as well as the biochemical composition of the mother's blood during pregnancy, and to a lesser extent, what goes on food-wise from birth to puberty. So now we're going to get a bit more specific in going into our actual situation, what's happening with us now. This is, of course, the most interesting part of learning how to evaluate our health, because it's the part we can do something about. It's a waste of time to spend a lot of time talking about genetic weaknesses because we can't really do anything about it. It's something already that is gone, has happened. So if we're going to get actively involved in our health, creating better health, creating happier lives, it's really in the area of our present condition where we can do this. Now, conditions have actually two separate aspects. Number one is what we can call a deeper condition. This can be something that is built up over many years. And then we can have a more, we can call a superficial or secondary condition, which can be changed sometimes within days, but for sure in the matter of weeks, or at the latest in a couple of months. I'm always inspired again and again when I meet people along my travels who have been involved in macrobiotic change, changing their food habits, changing their lifestyle, getting more involved in natural living, to see what a difference 2 to 3 months makes in the way they look. An inner quality comes out, which is very attractive. And a lot of the excesses that are kind of blocking the real you are melted away in this time. So when we think about condition, the first thing is that we want to deal with more acute things at the present if we have real problems that are bothering us. And in the long run, we're going to change our deeper condition, something which can take some years. But we have the time, and it's a matter of day by day changing your biological background. The most important part of your health condition is, in fact, the food you eat. Other things which affect your condition are the physical activities you are involved in and the mental activities you engage in. Whether or not you spend time breathing, conscious breathing. Most people are involved in a very flat kind of, let's say, average breath, and we have to really take time for breathing. That means breathing deeper than normal, taking the air deeper into the abdomen, filling up the lungs, and really expelling it. When you expel carbon dioxide thoroughly, you do a lot to retain a proper pH balance. That's the acid-alkaline balance of your body fluid. So all of these things are important for health. Most of the factors that determine your condition are things which everybody agrees upon. nobody would seriously argue with the fact that good breathing is part of health. And no one would seriously argue with the idea that physical movement is good for circulation and health. And everyone would agree that stress is not good for health. But the big problem again and again is, what do we do about the food? You'll have some people tell you that all raw food is the perfect way to eat. Other people will say all food fads are wrong and we should just eat the standard diet. So we give a lot of attention to the subject of food. And food is, as I also have said in a previous session, the very basis of our biological quality. It is the most important influence, and above all, it's the thing which we can consciously control best. You make a conscious decision every day. Do you put this in your mouth or do you put that in your mouth? Our stress level affects our condition, but it's not so easy to just drop our job or drop our families or the other things that are stressing us, and it's not even desirable that we do that. But rather, we should learn to become stronger so that we deal with the challenge of life, because that's what life is. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for development, and physical health is the basis for this development. It's very difficult to develop yourself if you're constantly being held back by considerations of your hemorrhoids or any other problems that are bothering you. They distract you from the greater view. So when we get beyond these physical ailments, then we can concentrate ourselves on developing ourselves in the greater perspective at an emotional level, mental level, spiritual level. But it all starts with the food we eat for breakfast. And people who eat bacon and eggs and that kind of breakfast will have more problems in their condition as opposed to eating, say, oatmeal, whole grain bread with something besides cheese on top of it. So our condition is very much related to this, and we have, with an eye for diagnosis, an easy time to see who is eating well and who isn't. You can see it on the face, you can see it on the hands, you see it on the body in general. Sometimes you can get fooled by some things. This diagnosis, or health evaluation as I like to call it, is not something which is, let's say, 100% always exactly accurate. There's basically no diagnosis form within medicine which is 100% accurate. And this kind of diagnosis of the condition of people is really dependent on your own physical condition to do the diagnosis, the diagnostic appraisal, the evaluation. And above all, it is an aspect which has a lot of subjective quality to it. In other words, you'll look at someone and you'll get a feeling, it's like a subtle feeling about something. You may not even be able always to describe exactly what it is. Today we're going to take up the different aspects, the different special characteristics which can give us insight into different organ problems or different health problems. But in the end, what we're really trying to do with this kind of process is to develop our own intuition. And intuition is something that comes more spontaneously, it comes more of itself. You can't really try to be intuitive. It has to flow, and it flows best when you yourself are in a health balance. And this then gives you the ability to feel problems in others. But you may guess wrong. And some of the typical signs of diseases don't always show in people. For example, cancer. There are certain signs on people which can give you an indication that they are definitely going towards cancer. And in the majority of people, this is true. But I have seen cancer patients who have very few signs that there's a cancer. And what I have found is that these are especially the people that have difficulty with their disease because the disease is not showing itself. That in people where it shows, it's like there the body is showing something. There's a problem, body is trying to deal with it. And some people are, it's like they're blocked. Their inner condition is so blocked that it doesn't get to the outside. Our evaluation of health is only possible if these inner conditions are showing themselves to the outside. And this is generally the case, but not always. So before we go into this in detail, I would like to stress the importance of keeping a certain amount of humility with this and not make absolute statements about things. For instance, if we see something that's showing as a health weakness, it would be more proper to say something, we see here something that goes in this direction rather than saying this person has a bad heart, kidneys, etc. Because we can't be sure that they really do. This is a theoretical concept which has been passed down through the ages, and it seems to hold up very well through our experience. In my experience, it has shown to be very valuable, but it is not a mystical kind of 100% insight into all of the problems. And another thing is that when we do this kind of conditional diagnosis, there are two different aspects. One is perceiving through the eyes what we see on the people, maybe touching them, but also we're listening to what they say. So if we're doing our evaluation of people without really getting to know them, we can also miss some things because valuable information also comes from hearing what the people say. For example, someone may say, my problem is that I always come too late. No matter what I do, if I say I'm going to be there at 7 o'clock, it's usually 7:30. And my friends, if they know that if I say I'm coming at 7, they just wait for me at 7:30 because they know I'm never on time. So you hear someone say something like this, this gives you also interesting insight. It might not show on the face or the hands, but this is insight into the person's condition, because always coming too late is a sign of a conditional problem. So we want to listen to what people say. And when we hear people speak and talk a little bit about themselves, we can learn much more about them. So we're listening to what people say as well as looking. When we just look, then we can see a lot, but we may miss some important things. And the best results for our evaluation are when we have both going for us. So I prefer, when I'm doing a real situation of counseling and evaluating someone's health, I prefer to listen to them speak for a while. It gives me a couple of advantages. Number one, I know what kind of work they do. It's very difficult to do proper evaluation if you don't know what kind of a job someone has. Are they working indoors, outdoors? Do they have a stressful job or is it a relaxed job? Do they like their job or not? Do they have time to eat proper food with the job? All these things are very interesting, and there's two things going on. You understand the person's practical situation better, and at the same time you get insights into their condition. So a session of health evaluation without talking to the person is really unthinkable. But for our purposes today, because we don't have time for that kind of in-depth study, what we're going to do is look at the people of what is showing on the outside, which is a lot, and this will give us good insights. And then if we can talk to them a little bit, we can deepen our statements on their condition. Now, one thing is also very good to do is what we call verifying through backups with this kind of health evaluation. Number one is if you see something that shows a tendency, like I'll give an example. If people have a lot of swelling in the area of the Achilles tendons, this is usually a sign that the kidneys are not in order. There's some kidney imbalance going on. When you touch people in the area of the Achilles tendons, you'll very quickly find out that there is all variations there. No one is really the same. And if it's tight and smooth and not a lot of excess water, this is more a sign that the kidneys are not being overly stressed. But if they're swollen, this happens if people take too much liquid or of the wrong kind of liquid, especially, then you'll have a swelling in the area, and this shows kidney disturbance. So we can feel the Achilles tendon and say, this feels like kidney problems. But the best thing would be, before we make a statement on that, is to verify it through other means, because the kidney condition is shown in the body in other ways than at the Achilles tendon. So if we can get that information verified through other things we look at, say we get 3 or 4 signs that we read on the body which tell us that the kidneys are a problem, then we can be a little more certain about our statement, you've got kidney problems, you need to do something about your kidneys. Whereas if you just feel the Achilles tendons and they're swollen and say, aha, that was a sign of kidneys, you might not find other signs, and it might turn out that this is not as big a problem as you thought it was. A way to verify it very quickly is, for example, to feel the person's hand. Now, sign of balance is when the hand is dry, not wet. You know, sometimes you'll shake hands with someone, you can feel the sweat on their hand. Now, if they've just been jogging in extreme heat, this is understandable. But sometimes people have been sitting there waiting to talk to you for an hour. They're just sitting in a chair, and then when they get up and shake your hand, you think they had just done 100 push-ups because the hands are sweaty. So, sweaty hands, sign of kidney disturbance. Now, if you can hook that in to the Achilles tendons, now you have 2 things speaking for kidneys, and now you can start really looking a little closer at what's going on with the kidneys here. Because now it's not just one aspect, but something that's been verified. Some people have then bags under the eyes. See, like swollen bags under the eyes look like a ring that goes under the eye, but then it's puffy and swollen. This is also a sign of kidneys. So with some people, you will find they have swollen Achilles tendons, their palms are wet, and they have bags under their eyes. If you find all 3 of these, you can be pretty certain that you have a kidney problem in front of you, because it's been shown in more ways than one. And experience shows that this is right. So this is the way we do it. Now, in general, we're talking about conditions that are either too much contraction, which we call yang, or too much expansion, which we call yin, or mixtures of both. The foods we eat have this energy. They have extreme yin and extreme yang. If we choose to eat meat and take an ice cream dessert, we've just had something that is extremely yang and extremely yin. This is the way most people eat. So the problems we see on them will also be a mixture of extreme yin and extreme yang. But it can often go like this. You'll check someone out and your evaluation will be, this person has yin condition in the kidneys because of all this excess water, but at the same time, the pancreas seems to be too tight, creating blood sugar problems. So the pancreas condition may be caused by too much yang, whereas the kidney condition is caused by too much yin. So what all this shows us is that to be healthy, we need foods that are not from the extremes of these two sides, but rather in the middle. In other words, grains and vegetables. And when we talk about kidneys, as an example, we know that there are different forms of kidney stress. One form is excess protein. For sure, the most extreme thing that we can do to our kidneys is give them too much protein to deal with. So high protein foods are normally what we call yang foods. They're animal food. It's meat and eggs and the dairy foods, high in protein. So the kidney stress can be caused by yang on the one side, but also from too much liquid. The Chinese have a word for our basic body energy. It's like a life spark that we have. It's the difference between an alive person and a dead person. It's that which keeps us going all the time. They call this energy qi, C-H-I. That's the way we write it in English. Qi is body energy. People who drink lots of liquid, according to Chinese understanding, and then urinate a lot, are giving away some of their kidney qi, or their kidney life force, through excessive urination. And here we see how the two tie together, because who is really interested in drinking a lot of liquid? It's not people who are eating food from the middle of the scale. You're not attracted to a lot of liquid unless you're taking very dry, salty, or compact foods. So if you like to eat, let's say, salty smoked meat, this is an extreme yang, which from the protein will be a burden for the kidneys. At the same time, people who eat that kind of food will like to take a lot of liquid because it makes them thirsty. And so they'll have, on the one hand, strong yang. On the other hand, they're taking a lot of yin excess, and they're giving away their qi, their kidney qi energy. So we look at these different conditions, yin and yang, or mixtures of both. Now, some diseases have a quality which is obviously more yin or yang. Others are mixed. An example of a very yin disease is diabetes. A diabetic has a yin condition. So when we learn these things, we don't even really need to look at the person so much. If we know they have diabetes, then we can look at them still, but we know from their disease that it's basically a problem of too much yin, too much fat, too much sugar, and any amount of sugar is too much. Then we can look at other problems which could be, say, yang, like pancreatic cancer. So if a person has this kind of disease, then without doing a closer examination of them, we know that they have a condition which is excessively yang. However, they may also have some aspects of the opposite. You know, these two are not finely divided, and on the cover of my book, there is a symbol from the original Chinese philosophy of Taoism, which gives us a good idea of how to look at these yin and yang points when we look at diagnosis, that the yin and yang is not divided straight, but rather it has a curve showing that there's no exact limit there to where does the yin stop and where does the yang begin. Rather, it's a flow, and there's even bits of the other in it. There's no clear border between these two. That's important for us to understand because we don't divide people just up into neat categories. So there's always both of them. Of course, modern men or modern people think very analytically and don't see this in the real way, but rather look for an analytical division. So most people, because they have enjoyed foods and beverages and things from the whole scale of yin and yang, we'll find that almost everybody has signs that will show some yin and some yang. So what our point is here is to find out what is predominant. And when we get that, then we know which direction it should go. One thing I'd also like to say in connection with our conditional diagnosis is that if we get too analytical about this and too picky, we get to the point where we're actually afraid to do anything with this because we're afraid we'd make a mistake. You know, like, am I too yin or too yang? And if I eat too many carrots, this will make me, you know, out of balance. We can say, do away with those fears by just pointing out that in general, if you eat the kind of food that macrobiotic recommendations include, this will normally lead you to health. It does this because it reestablishes your intuitive power. You feel which foods are right for you. And our purpose in doing all these things is just to try to reestablish that health balance, to reestablish your intuition. And when you have that, then you make your decisions much more intuitively. But until that intuition is reestablished, you may need to rely on these concepts more. But it is not important that you immediately understand your own condition as yin or yang, etc. You may need to experiment. By experimenting, you can take your food and steer it in one direction or the other. And you can get an idea of, is this too yin or too yang? If you feel good during the period you're eating the lighter foods, the more yin foods, you can be fairly sure that your problem is more yang. If you feel better when you're taking the heavier foods, then you would have the opposite situation. So when we go through this, let's remember that although I'm going to be maybe a little picky with different aspects of the face and of the body, and when we stick at this yin and this is yang, that we don't see this as something that you have to study a long time to use practically. That basically everyone, after this seminar, is perfectly capable of making some general judgments about yin and yang, and especially if you go one step further, which I hope many of you do, which is to include in the foods which will bring you into better balance, that you don't have the idea that you don't dare to do anything until you learn more. I've had situations where people don't give their family and friends advice because they're afraid maybe they'll tell them they're yin and actually they're yang. And they say they'll wait until somebody with more proficiency comes who can really tell them how it is. But this, of course, is not wise to do because people then will miss a chance to start eating healthier foods. If everybody, let's say, would cut down on the sugar and the meat and the cheese and the eggs and the coffee, just in general, and eat a more grain and vegetable-oriented diet, their health will improve dramatically. So what I would say is if you're uncertain about whether it's yin or yang, then the best thing to do is to just always steer it to the middle, because you can never go wrong with that. Just keeping people to the middle if you're trying to help other people with their yin and yang problems. Just always keeping it about it, in a nice golden middle, and then you'll help them. And then as you learn more and more, you can specifically use this knowledge of yin and yang aspects of the body. So then with that, we can go into some of the details. Now, these two conditions, yin and yang, we have, let's say, first of all, yin. Typical for a yin condition is, let's think of the skin. The skin would be loose and flaccid rather than tight. The yinness, the expansion, is shown in the skin. Some people think they're born with a certain kind of skin or tissue quality. But through correct choices in food, as well as physical exercise, you can transform the weakness you may have of loose skin into something better. If you can pull the skin and it pulls far out, like this, then that's very yin. On the other hand, some people, when they take the skin here, they can't pull it all. Now, see, I can pull some, see, because this skin doesn't have a thick layer of fat under it, so the skin has a flexibility. But for many people, when they try to take the skin, they can't do it. They take something that's like doughy and thick. They can't pull it away from their arm because there's a lot of excess fat. So this is more like the hardening kind of fat. So if we see someone who has like a tendency to double chin or very full in this area, this also is a sign of more yin gathering here. In general, we can see a tendency of strong yin, especially in the area between the eyebrows and the eyes. This tends to swell up and hang rather than, it gets puffy rather than being tight. If we have balance, this skin should actually be tight here between the eyebrows and the eyelids. But you'll see many people who on the surface don't seem to have much excess. There's no double chin. They don't have the excess on the face. When you look carefully at them, you can discover the coffee drinkers and those that like strong yin, because this swells up and hangs down. With some people, it gets to be so much that it's almost like they're looking out from under it. In other people, it's just a general swelling. But as you look at people to judge yin and yang, look especially there. This is the best giveaway place for having strong yin in the body. And you'll find that people who eat macrobiotically have very little of that, because our condition as macrobiotics is in general more yang than the average person. More yang means less fat in general. Fat is more yin. So the more weight you put on, the more yin your condition. Now there's two ways of doing this. There's more yin fat and there's more yang fat. We have in English a wonderful way of describing the difference. Some of you probably know this. It's what's called the fat excess in the apple form and the fat excess in the pear form. The apples are those who tend to gather it up here. They like have a full face. They'll gather a lot around the shoulders. They may have a big belly. But when you look at them from the waist down, they don't look that far out of balance. It's like you just would hold your hand in front of you and say, above, overweight, and look at the bottom part and say, no, actually, look okay. Those are the apples, with an apple form being bigger at the top than at the bottom. The ones called the pears, they look pretty good in the upper part, but suddenly at the waist, everything just goes out here. It's just suddenly there's, all of this stuff hanging around. And if you just look at them from the waist up, they look actually pretty good. So you can easily imagine then, the pears are holding more yang excess. It's going down. So problems that show up more in the bottom part of the body, conditionally we call, in general, more yang. In general, there's exceptions. And problems that tend to show themselves more in the upper part of the body, we call more yin. So if you take strong yin foods, you might get a skin rash that might show up on the face. Ice cream, chocolate. So we see young people today excessively consuming chocolate and ice cream, both more yin substances, and they get really bad cases of acne. Now, one thing doctors sometimes do, unfortunately, is they will give these young people antibiotics, because acne is caused by bacteria in the skin which feed on fat. And through the process of them feeding on the fat and giving off their toxic material, acne is formed. So if you give antibiotics, you can actually kill these, and it will take care of the problem on the surface. But I am seeing more and more young people whose lives have been turned into a nightmare because of this kind of thinking. What happens to people who take antibiotics in this very light-hearted way over the years? They become physically very weak, and especially problems like candida, which is an intestinal fungus which is taking more and more people today. People who have had a long history of antibiotics are very easy targets for candida. So what we would do instead of that is we would say, you need to readjust your fat consumption, the amount of oil you're taking, so that it doesn't store in the skin and there's no problem. So especially yin kind of fat, which would go up. The more yang would go down. Now also for general diagnosis, we have left and right. Now in Chinese medicine, we learn that the left side of the body has a general energy flow which is downward, and the right side of the body has an energy flow upward. It's like our qi energy flows. So on the left side, our energy should flow very smoothly. Now, you can imagine what kind of an energy that is. Is it yin or yang when it's flowing down like that? Yang is the downward movement. So we would say good quality yang food, in other words, grains, proper condiments, root vegetables. Those root vegetables grow down. Those are the kind of foods which support an energy flow downward. On the right side, the foods that support this upward movement are things like green vegetables, broccoli growing up, and other leafy greens. The greens of radishes. Many people throw away the greens of radishes, but they're very good as food, very high in minerals. We use them in soups. They support the upward flow on the right side. Now, it's very interesting for me to experience people again and again who will tell me all of my problems are on the left side. It's always either my left kidney or my left elbow or my left shoulder or my left lung, but all of my problems are one side, or people saying the other. So for our diagnosis purposes, this is very valuable information, to hear someone tell me all of my problems are on the left side, because this is a flow of energy which we could call heaven's force. The right side we can call earth's force, or yang and yin. That this heaven's force, or yang energy direction, is being disturbed. Now, what disturbs yang? Excess yin. So people who like to eat a lot of sugar, a lot of tropical fruits, a lot of bananas, oranges, take a lot of coffee, drink alcohol, etc., and then the yin dairy foods like yogurt, milk, ice cream, these things will cause a disturbance in the energy that it should be moving down. It's like it just blocks it. And the block is a kind of discord. It's a kind of interruption. And this sets the stage for health problems. So in macrobiotic counseling, we tell people who have all left side problems Your condition is too yin. You've taken too much yin food. You're disturbing this energy flow. And interestingly enough, we have one way of verifying this, and that is breast cancer. Because I work in a clinic which has a large oncology department, I see a lot of women with breast cancer. And I myself have a little test going where I try to guess. When I first meet the woman, I try to guess, is this left or right? Because women who get breast cancer on the left side definitely have more yin influence. Their condition is more yin than on the right side. Now again, this is not 100%, so maybe I shouldn't say definitely. Better would be to say that it is probable, because I would say my success rate is about 80 or 85% of guessing left or right when I look at them. Just from a quick look to see what kind of energetic vibration do I get from them at an intuitive level. And breast cancer, which comes out on the left side, is the left breast is more governed by heaven's force, and the disturbance will be from too much yin. The right breast is more governed by earth's force going up and will be more disturbed by strong yang. Now this is a bit of an oversimplification, but it's to give a clear idea of what we're talking about here. So these problems develop one side or the other, then we know more yin or more yang. Now, for us interesting also is the fact that the liver is an organ on the right side of the body, and that the spleen is an organ on the left side of the body. So we know that the spleen is governed by heaven's force, and the liver is governed by earth's force. Or we can say the spleen, more yang energy, the liver, more yin energy. So what really disturbs the spleen is strong yin, especially sweets. Too many sweets, wrong quality sweet, sugar sweet in all its forms. Danish pastries, everything. So this will make the spleen, which is by its nature a more compact and yang organ, will make it more yin. The liver is especially burdened by strong yang. The liver needs light energy. It needs greens, green vegetables, sprouts, things like that are very good. It's upward energy and supports liver function. So, in general, we've got these two sides, left and right, and then we can also go in with specific organs, or looking at the left kidney and right kidney. So if someone is always having problems only on one side, then think about that. Then we have inner and outer. Problems that show up deep inside. That's more compact. So that's more yang. And problems that show up on the periphery are more yin. So the absolute middle point of our body is about where the pancreas is. And pancreatic disturbances are very often caused by excessive yang. But again, this is a simplification. If we eat a lot of sugar, refined sugar, we will constantly be forcing our pancreas to give off larger amounts of insulin than is necessary in normal body function, so that we can burn the pancreas out. Now the pancreas was designed to last a lifetime. But if we eat 100 to 120 pounds of sugar each year, which is the average consumption today, then we can actually burn our pancreas out much earlier. So, we have some general aspects of these different organs we can see, but basically any organ can be damaged from either excess. This is not an absolute thing. So if we see someone then who has a tendency to hardness in the body, in general, this will be a good sign of strong yang, hardness, showing like compacted fat which sits very deep. Sometimes we feel it directly, like if we touch the abdominal area, we can feel the hardness. We have someone lie on their back, we press in the area of the liver, intestines, pancreas, we feel a lot of hardness. Then this is a sign of yang. But also if we feel shoulders, we can touch shoulders and often feel strong yang. Some people are so hard in this area. They'll even complain about it and say, well, it's my job, I sit hunched over. Well, that can create some temporary problems if you can get some temporary muscle problems from bending over wrong at your desk. But very often, we find that these so-called wrong posture problems actually are reflecting fat excess which is being stored in the wrong places. Now, the shoulder areas, if we follow the acupuncture meridians, which is also interesting for diagnostic purposes, and I would recommend anyone who seriously wants to deepen his understanding of this kind of health evaluation, that you learn the general area of the different meridians, where the meridians go in the body. There are 12 basic acupuncture meridians, and you can learn them in a very short time, and you'll find that disturbances sometimes will show themselves along those meridians. And this can also be valuable information, because if someone now gets hardening, like recently a man I saw who complained about a lot of stiffness in his shoulders, and when I felt his shoulders, over the right shoulder here, this was not just stiffness. I found a fat glob this big that I could move around. Just right there. Of course he was having problems. Think of, what would the body do with all that? With all this excess? It has to do something with it. Well, through the acupuncture flow, the body was depositing it in this area because with him it was a lot of intestinal problems. And the intestinal meridians, large and small intestine, go in the shoulder area. The large intestine a little more in the front, the small intestine a little more in the back. But in general, when we get fat accumulations in this shoulder area, we know that we're dealing here with intestinal hardness. Another interesting thing to do is to feel the backbone. Now, as we feel the backbone, we should be able to feel the elevations and the dents when we go down. The backbone with the vertebrae, you can feel each vertebrae. But you'll find if you do touch diagnosis of people feeling this, you'll find that their excesses are showing in the form of hard, compacted fat around the vertebrae, so that when you run your hand down their back, you don't feel the individual vertebrae. You feel one smooth, long surface. Feel like just running your hand down the side of a wall is the way it feels, rather than feeling the individual vertebrae. So if you feel that, then it's time for some discharging of heavy yang excess, because yang is setting itself deep into the body. Now, in macrobiotics, we talk about the spiritual channel, which is a flow of energy going right through the middle of your body, connecting your energy centers, which are called chakras. If your back is hard like that, you are obstructing the flow through your spiritual channel. It means you'll have more trouble developing your intuitive side. Of course, some people do have such a strong ability and talent for that side of life that the physical condition doesn't slow them down so much. They can, in spite of it, can still be very spiritual individuals. So I don't want to give the impression that only people who have this optimal biological condition can develop themselves in this direction. But let's say that you definitely enhance your possibilities for developing into other realms if you keep your spiritual channel unblocked. And that means you can feel the vertebrae down the back. Of course, the best way to find this out is to practice. In other words, check each other out. And in the time you have at the break, you can then just check each other out. You can check your Achilles tendons. And it's especially good if you can find someone who is eating a pretty good macrobiotic program, and there are several people here who are doing that, and then those who are not, and try to compare those and see, and you get some very quick feedback. You'll find that the condition of the hands is different. You'll find that the shoulders feel different, the backbone. You'll see that the area between the eyes, between the eyebrows and the eyelashes, or the eyelids, you'll find that this area is different. You can see it's a totally different biological condition. And the fun thing is that everybody can have it if you just work on it for a while. So this gives you a quick general diagnosis. Now, when I do individual counseling, I always look at the hands. I almost always check out the shoulders and the back, unless it's very obvious to me from looking that it's unnecessary. And also sometimes I like to check in the condition to see if I can get my hand under the scapula, the shoulder blade. Because when people have hardened yang, too much eggs, too much bacon, too much of these heavy animal foods, it compacts and you can't get your hand between the shoulder blade and the back. It just like it stops here. It's like pushing your hand against a piece of concrete. That's the way it feels. And it takes several months because the way it goes is with discharging is that the yin excess goes away first. So you'll get rid of the puffiness and the flabbiness around the face. That goes away fairly fast. But it takes a while to get rid of that heavy stuff that gathers in the deeper areas. So I'll maybe check out the feet, the Achilles tendon, and just in a couple of minutes I can get a pretty good idea of how stressed this body is, biologically stressed. And it's amazing the results I will see if I meet this person a few months later. I would say 2 to 3 months is a good time for a renewal of the biological condition, that I will have a transformed individual before me. It's really great. It's like, you have this person with overweight, excess, and you see them a couple months later and they've just, like a miracle, they've just become thinner, more active, but especially you see it in the eyes, because we use the eyes for diagnosing in general the nervous system. The eyes give us insight into the condition of the nervous system. If a person is very nervous, he can still remain fairly calm, but you'll see in his eyes that he's nervous. And many people who are eating the modern food, you'll see that they tend to have, it's almost like a veil over their eyes. There's no real spark in the eyes. And what comes after some weeks of eating proper food is that this spark starts returning. You can see it. I'd say on an average, if people do the whole program, about 2 weeks is all it takes. Within 2 weeks, that spark is showing. So this kind of diagnosis is what we call a holistic health evaluation. We're not going so much at saying we're diagnosing weak kidneys here. What can you do now to strengthen kidneys? That's not so important to us because we know that the kidneys are reflecting a whole body condition. The important thing we learn by studying the basics of acupuncture, I'm not an acupuncturist, but I have read about Chinese concepts of medicine, is that we understand that nobody has only one problem, because the energy of the acupuncture meridians flows from one to the other, one organ to the other. For example, the energy of the kidneys flows on to the liver. And the energy that's flowing into the kidneys is coming from the lungs. So, if we now look at someone who's got these signs of kidney problems, which we have just gone through, then for me, it would be unsatisfactory to leave it at that and say, well, we've got lots of signs of kidneys, that's the problem here. Because by understanding holistic health, we know that this kidney problem doesn't just happen by itself. All the organs of the body are related. So for me, as an automatic reflex would be to consider the condition of the liver, which follows the kidneys, and consider the condition of the lungs, which precede the kidneys. But then I might also take a closer look at heart and circulation, because the kidneys are the so-called governor of heart and circulation. So there is another one. And they might even be interested in looking at the spleen and pancreas because they're the governor of the kidneys. In other words, we've got a lot of interconnections going on here, and basically everything is connected to everything. And any one health problem is always a sign of a general health imbalance. We can use the female organ problems like menstrual cramps and menstrual disturbances, something which is a real big problem, one of the most common reasons for people coming for counseling. And we can see that these problems in the female area are actually nothing more than a reflection of a general biological imbalance, that their health is not in order, and that it's just being shown through these means. The body, through menstruation, showing that things are not in order. So we should have balance, we should have an even flow in all the organs of the body. And then that's what we call health. It's everything staying within certain limits. That means the blood pressure staying within certain limits. It means your pH, quality of your blood. Of course, it stays in limits because the body has to do it, but we take the stress away if we make it easier. The blood sugar is kept within certain limits. That's real health, and that is the common work of many organs. So when we walk along a street of a major city now, or any city where we see lots of people, we'll see that people are not doing so well. I'm always amazed when I fly from Europe back to the States to see that the overweight problems in this country are greater than in Europe. In Sweden, you'll also see overweight problems, but the overweight problems of Sweden are minor compared to what I see happening here. Like the overweight problems here get really out of control. And it is a a problem which has to do with lifestyle, partly, but especially food. And so, especially the USA really needs to think about better health. This country, I think, has some health problems that seem to me to be further down the road of degeneration than in the northern European countries where I spend most of my time. And this doesn't have to be. We can reverse this. You know that within 120 days, you can totally renew your red blood cells. That means about 4 months. So that means that already after 2 to 3 months, you have renewed the majority of your blood, the majority of these cells. That means that within a relatively short time, you can transform health imbalance to health. Now, not all problems, of course, are solved in this time, but you can take a major step to making balance in this time by renewing your blood quality. So, when we look at people, we'll see that overweight can be a problem. Other people are spending a lot of time talking to themselves. Doesn't matter where I am, I'm always, again and again, meeting people who spend a lot of time talking to themselves. And you know, this is a sign that there's something wrong with the nervous system. And you can also see it with people who have their knee going like this all the time. Or that kind of energy, we call that excessive yin. It's like you've taken an excess yin and it's the way the body's discharging it. It's like a nervous kind of thing. So we want to balance not only the body but also the mind, and we do that through the meeting point of these two, which is the nervous system. And nervous system disorders, I can see, are also becoming a major threat to the future welfare of our society. So, I would like to ask, are there any questions considering this? Now, in future sessions, we're going to go into the real details of these things. This hour, I'm really concerned in introducing to you the general concepts of conditional understanding, and then we will go into the detailed points later on. But so far, everything is clear. Okay? Good. So we have a couple of minutes here. Let's just take somebody for a quick example and see what we can do with that one. Okay? Let's say right here. Would you like to come up? So right there. So now, if she were to come to me and say, what do you think of my health? First of all, looking, I see signs of excess. Then I might just take a look at the hands. Now feel your hand. Okay, now feel my hand. What's the difference?
Drier, yes.
Mm-hmm. She says, my hand is drier. That's right, her hand is slightly moist. Then I would go here. Now feel. Now here, remember we talked about the wall instead of ups and downs? When I go down her vertebrae, I can't feel the individual vertebrae, but rather there is hard, compacted yang going down the backbone. So she's holding a lot of deep yang. She needs to discover the adventure of macrobiotic discharge. Now I try to go in under her shoulder blades. An impossible task. It's okay if I joke a little bit. It's kind of nasty of me to do this, but anyway. Then I'll go down and feel the Achilles tendon. So, somewhat swollen, but not as bad as it could have been. So, we talked about constitutional diagnosis in an earlier session. We can see here, in general, her constitution goes more to the yang side than the yin side. It's more yang. It's more like a compact energy. So she has to be especially careful with all these things that are creating this hardness. Hardness here showing intestinal hardness, the hardness down the back. These are all very, very deep things which will need some months. But with the proper approach, she can transform that. And it would be very interesting for me to see her, if I come back in the near future, to be able to see within a couple of months how much things had changed for her. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we'll be taking a break now as we finish off this introduction to constitutional diagnosis. And during the break, I hope that you will take a couple seconds to touch those around you. Just learning from your experience, it's the best way. This kind of thing you learn most from doing it. About 5% is understanding, and 95% is touching and practicing. And when you have touched 100 Achilles tendons, you know immediately what I'm talking about. Okay, since there's no questions, we'll conclude this hour. Thank you.